So when we're considering anything to do with safe isolation or testing, one of the most important things we've got to consider is the equipment we're using. So you can see here on the table what we've got in front of us is various types of equipment. So you can see here we've got a full test kit, fully loaded with the stuff we might need as a technician to carry out those kind of tasks. But also it's important to look at those individual items that are part of your everyday toolkit. So you can see here we've got things like proving units, where you're going to use for safe isolation. Also included in that would be your voltage indicator. And again, we've got to make sure we're using the right stuff. So it's British standard or European norm to GS38, spring-loaded test probes, also fused, so the right kind of equipment. Also things like socket and C testers. This is a 3-phase version. Obviously, you've got them in single phase as well. Really useful tools for finding out what's live and what's dead. And also what you've got here is you've got your lock-off equipment. So you can see here we've got some labels that we're going to have to put on. We've got padlocks and we've got different types of devices that we would use when we're locking off depending on the situation we're in. One for individual breakers, for instance, and obviously as I've mentioned, the padlocks as well. And what I would say with this is that you've got to make sure this is part of your toolkit. So this is essential stuff, not a nice to have. So I would stress that, if you're having this stuff, you're complying with the Health and Safety at Work Act. You're also complying with the Electricity at Work regulations. And if you do have this and your employer provides you with this or you purchase this stuff yourself, make sure you're looking after your equipment as well. So it's not just being thrown in the back of the van at the end of the day, but actually you're taking care of it. So each time you get it out, you know it's in the proper condition and it's not damaged. This kind of stuff is expensive and you need to look after it. So yeah, essential part of your toolkit and essential part of your PPE. So let's have an example where you've come to do some service and maintenance on, say, a combi oven like we've got here. First things first, you've got to make sure you're letting people know in the area what you're doing, what kind of work you're undertaking, because obviously you're going to have to knock off some supplies. So that could be the manager who's in charge and obviously people around working on that equipment of what you've exactly come to do. Also, we've got to make sure we've got the right equipment. So for example, have we got voltage indicators? Have we got the tools? And have we got the lock-off kit to make sure that we're safely isolating properly? So depending on the situation where we want to isolate, for instance, to do service and maintenance, might depend on the setup you've got. So in this instance, we've got a plug and socket situation here. We've also got local isolation. And just out of shot, what you can't see is we've got a distribution board. So in this scenario, what we're going to say is that we're going to have to replace or work on this particular piece of equipment, but there's a piece of equipment already plugged in. So you can see here it's plugged in and we're going to assume that this piece of equipment is actually live. Okay, so the first thing we're going to have to do is we're going to have to unplug it. So we safely isolate and knock it off. We can unplug. And then what we've got in this situation is we can actually just prove that what this is doing is correct. So we've got the right voltage there, and because it's 3-phase, we've got the right rotation. So something like a socket and C would be perfect in that situation. So I'm just going to plug this in. Turn that supply back on. And what you can see there from the indicator is that it's indicating that we've got voltage, we've got 3 phases, and actually we've got phase rotation going the right way. So that's a handy little check just to know that what we've got up to the point of the equipment is doing what it should do. So in this instance, what we've done so far is we've unplugged the plug and socket, the plug's been removed, and that in itself is a means of isolation, okay? But what we'd have to do is make sure it's secure. So we would have some kind of kit that would be able to lock that off or on here to stop that being plugged back in. For instance, if you wasn't in the vicinity, you don't want someone coming back in and plugging that kit back in if you're working on it. But as we said, we've also got local isolation, our 3-phase isolator here. So for this instance, we're also going to lock off at this point. But remember, what we've done previous to that is we've spoke to anyone in charge in that kitchen or wherever we're working to make sure we seek permission. That is very important. We don't just go into installations and start knocking things off. So seek permission and then we lock off. Then what we've got is we've got our equipment, so we need to make sure that's secure. So you can see here, we've got a padlock and we've also got our label. So in this instance, what I'm going to do to make sure it's securely locked off, I'm just going to put that through the rotary isolator. I can also add my label at this point, like so. Make sure that's nice and secure, my label's there. You can actually put your details on these as well, so they know it's you working on it. That is nice and securely locked off. And a really important one is the key. We don't put the key on top of things. We don't put the key somewhere random. We put that key in our control. So that goes in my pocket, and I'm under control of that installation for the duration while I'm working on this piece of equipment. So there might be a situation where you need to isolate actually at the distribution board. So here we are, we're in a riser with a 3-phase distribution board. We've got a 3-phase circuit breaker here, which the other end is attached to a piece of catering equipment. So if we've got to isolate here, same rules apply as if you're isolating at the actual isolator itself or the piece of equipment, but we've just got to make sure we've got the right devices. So you can see here, I've got a device for fitting on a circuit breaker, I've got my padlock on my key, and I've also got my warning notice, and obviously we'll need a screwdriver in this instance as well. So pretty simple, ask permission as usual to isolate the supply. So I've asked permission in this instance, so I'm safe to isolate. Turn off the supply, take the breaker device, when it feels nice and tight, that's locked in. Again, take your padlock and your sign. You've just got a gap for it to go through there. Put your sign on at the same time. Make sure it's nice and secure. You've got your label on. You can put your name on there so you know you're operating on and it's nice and safe. And then remember, key, not on the table, not in your toolbox, key goes in your pocket. All safely isolated. We'll go and check the other end to see that the supply is dead by using our 10 steps, and then we're good to work on that equipment. Now, we're safely isolated. You can see we're locked off, keys in my pocket. You can see that the side of the combi oven has been removed. Now what I've got to do is I've got to take my approved GS38 voltage indicator. I've got my proving unit. So I've had a check again that the leads are all intact, it's in good condition, it's working, it doesn't look damaged in any way. And if you do come across any equipment that's damaged, make sure you're getting it replaced, okay? Now, with proving unit, really simple. What we're going to do, we're just going to put it in here like this into the proving unit. That's going to light up and tell me that this voltage indicator is actually working. Once I know that's working, I'm good to go on my tests. So when we're dealing with 3 phases, we need to do 10 tests, okay? So we're safely isolated here. We've got our cable plugged back in, our plug and socket. So I'm going to go over to the piece of equipment and see that it's actually dead here. So I go over, and what I do is I find the incoming supply, so I can go onto the brown phase first, or L1, and I'm going to go between earth. So L1 and earth, L2 and earth, L3 and earth. There's 3 tests already. Move over to the neutral, neutral and L1, neutral and L2, neutral and L3. And I've got no supply there. Then I go between my phases, L1 and L2, L1 and L3, L2 and L3. So there's 9. And the one that everybody forgets is between neutral and earth. Between neutral and earth, and that's dead as well. So there's your 10 tests. Like I say, you can count them out if that makes sense. And then what we've got to also do, we've got to go back to our proving unit and just prove that nothing's happened in that short space of time and that is still working. So I've proved that it's still working. I've done my 10 tests. I'm happy that there is no supply coming to this combi oven. Let's look at another scenario where we might have to isolate and lock off at the actual isolator itself. We might have a situation where we haven't actually got a plug and socket situation. This could be an adaptable box or fed straight into the isolator. So this might be our means of isolation. Now what we've done in this instance is we have locked off at the distribution board on the particular circuit breaker that's supplying this isolator. So now we need to check, again, we've asked permission, now we need to check that we have got no supply here at this particular isolator. So I'm just going to take the front cover off. Voltage indicator, we're checking the leads, We're making sure it's not damaged, all working correctly. And as we've said, we're going to check that this is actually working. And that's working fine. Now, with three-phase systems, we need to do 10 tests. Okay, so we're going to do that now. So we're going to look at the incoming supply into this particular isolator. Going to go onto the earth terminal, and then we're going to go between L1, L2, L3. Just hold them on for a couple of seconds. Then onto the neutral, neutral and L1, neutral and L2, neutral and L3. Then we go between our phases, L1, L2, L1, L3, L2, L3, and finally our 10th test onto the neutral, onto the earth. So you can see there we've got no supply. Remember, lastly, we've done our 10 tests. We still need to check the voltage indicator is working. That's all working fine. We now know there's no supply to this isolator and this equipment is safe to work on. Another good sort of intermediate test we can do is a test where we're testing to see, before we actually do the safe isolation procedure and we're locked off, we use a no contact voltage indicator just to check that we've got nothing on the cable supplying or any of the equipment just before we take that panel actually off the wall. So really simple check, turn this device on and it will start flashing. And then I'm just going to run it on the outside of this cable, as you can see there, run it all the way around, maybe in another spot if you want to, just to check there's no supply there. And then we can also just run it on this equipment as well, just on various parts of the equipment. So it's called safe to touch, using this no contact voltage indicator just before we take the panel off and perform safe isolation. It's just another good check to check we've got no supply there.